No.
I grew up as an only child in Chicago, and my dad was a Chicago cop. It was the 1950s, and the schools weren't very good in Chicago proper. So my parents wanted to move out to the suburbs so that I'd have a better education and that we'd feel more safe. He felt this was the best he could do in raising a child. The only problem was if you worked for the show city, you couldn't live outside city limits. So in making the decision to move, he had to cover up where he actually lived and take on an address with some friends of ours and pretend he lived there. And as a child of about 7 years old, I had to keep the secret as well. So if anyone asked what my dad did for a living, I wasn't allowed to tell. So I was to say, he's self-employed. Well, what does a 7-year-old know about what self-employed
It must have been really hard challenge. It's just like my little siblings have no idea when they're saying things that they're not supposed to.
So I was entrusted with the secret, but also told to keep secret and to keep quiet. And over during my time growing up, parents that just devoted themselves to giving me the best of anything they could were very encouraging in anything I wanted to do. But the underlying message all these years was always, don't say anything, don't answer questions about what we do or where we live. So there was a sense of be quiet and keep everything to yourself. At the same time, I was very drawn to the church, and we were in the Catholic Church at that time. And we went on Sundays, but it wasn't enough for me. And I found out that the church that was a couple blocks from where we lived had a 7 a.m. Monday through Friday service, and I wanted to go. I told my mom, and she said, "Oh, you'd have better things to do than to go to church. You should get some exercise. That's better for you to get exercise than to go to church." But I just really was drawn to going to church. So I decided that I could do both of these things and get onto my bike and ride up to church. Wasn't much of an exercise time, but everyone would think I was getting on my bike to exercise, and I was really secretly going off to church.
Seems like the reversal situation is the kids that run away from church.
So then at that point in junior high, I would consider it my secret with God that I would be going off to church and nobody knew. So the first time I was left alone in the house without any supervision, a lot of kids will have parties or do drinking or some other thing they're not supposed to do. And what I did is I had this elaborate church service. I think I was about 12 years old, and I set up the whole dining room table with candles and a Bible, and I had some music. And this again is just me and doing some sort of what I considered my personal worship. And I wasn't about to tell anybody about it, but unfortunately the candles that I lit were too close up to this little chandelier that was hanging above the table and burnt 2 holes in the bottom of the chandelier.
And did your parents see it?
So they didn't notice for a really long time, and it was probably about 2 months later. In the meantime, they had a lot of parties, and everyone smoked in those days. And what I discovered is that one day during dinner, my mom was looking up at the chandelier saying, "Oh my gosh, where'd those holes come from?" And I didn't say a thing.
Why?
And then she said, "Do you know anything about these?" I said, "Well, do you suppose that any of your friends that were smoking held their cigarettes up too close?" "Oh," she said, "that's probably why." So I got away with that one. But I still had the sense that all the times I was doing what I called God stuff, I had to be secretive about it because it was considered dorky.
Not the normal.
Exercise was preferable, and doing things that were social were preferable, but I just had this kind of secret life going on. And also, since I'd been told to be a quiet person and not say much, I just felt that it was perfectly okay to live my life having a relationship with God that nobody knew about and I could keep to myself, and that would be fine. Well, it turned out not to be so fine. Because as an adult, I had joined the Episcopal Church and really got more and more involved. And I was serving as a Eucharistic minister, but still keeping a lot of my desires to, well, actually, when I was 7, I think I wanted to be a nun, and then I wanted to be a priest, but in the Catholic Church, that's not possible. And when I said to my parents, I'd like to be a nun, my mom said, oh, you'll get over it. You won't really want to do that. So I felt it on some level it wasn't okay to want to be an ordained person. And also, if you're being told your whole growing up time to be quiet, how would you ever be a preacher? Because it's the wrong message.
That's spreading the message.
So, right. So one morning, as I was serving in a church in Iowa as a chalice bearer, I was kneeling there and I suddenly felt like I was things were blurry and I was dizzy. And I held onto the rail for support and thought maybe I was just having a little bit of vertigo. And then about 3 seconds later, for just a flash, and I'd say this was about 5 seconds worth, all the rail and chairs and all the furniture between me and the altar table disappeared. I mean, I suddenly looked and there was nothing there. And that's when I thought I was probably Looney Tunes, and maybe my brain was playing tricks on me. And if I said anything to anybody, they'd sure think I was seeing things. I was just a little bit, sleep deprived. So of course, what did I do? I kept another secret.
You didn't tell anyone.
So I finally talked to a priest about it. Said, now I know this is going to sound really goofy, but when I was serving close to the altar, all of a sudden the rails disappeared and the chairs disappeared, and I don't know what this means. Do you think something's wrong with me? And she said, oh, that's a message that means there's supposed to be no barriers between you and the altar. And I said, no barriers? That's right. It means, I think, that you're just to be the one up behind the altar. I said, well, that's not my plan. Well, you better think about that again. And from that day on, it was very scary and kind of waiting for things like that to happen again, and it never did. But I felt as though I had gotten this little nudge that came absolutely from nowhere, and there's no logical, rational explanation whatsoever. That I was to be behind the altar, that I was to be touching and giving bread to people, and to handing out bread and wine as sacraments. And yet, how do I overcome this growing up time when I'm told to be very quiet, and my whole relationship had been very closed, kind of me and God, and not involving other people. And if I was going to do this priest thing, and if I was going to be serious, I was going to have to reverse years and years of learning to be quiet.
Learning to not share your relationship with God.
So the idea of going to seminary, which finally happened when somebody at the church said, well, when are you going to go off to seminary? I said, seminary? Well, sure, everybody knows except you that that's what you're meant to do. I said, well, it's not that I don't know it, it's just that I haven't really verbalized it with anyone. I said, well, it's pretty clear, and I think you need to form a discernment team and figure it out. So we went from there. But all along, so started out in seminary, and that was 3 years of study, and it was really hard to go back at age 50, to go back to school and do a 3-year program. And
where did you go?
I went to Seabury Western, north of Chicago, and it was one of the best and hardest 3 years of my life, and very much transforming. And it still makes me a little bit scared to stand up in front of people and say anything, even to make announcements. And there's part of me that just kind of wants to be that 7-year-old child, thinking that it's okay to be quiet all the time, but it really isn't okay anymore. And I've taken vows to share what I feel, and I'm here doing that now every day, and it's probably the luckiest I've ever felt to be in this place.
What brought you to Iowa from Chicago?
Well, Chicago's where I grew up, but then I got married and we moved, and my husband's job was in Iowa. And at that point, he was a university professor, and I trained as a librarian after that, and worked in a college library for 15 years. So both of us are midlife career change people. So I was able to do for a whole chunk of years as an adult a job that didn't really require interaction with people very much.
And then another thing about church too is it's like a family.
Yeah, it is.
So,
but I had to learn that one message, the no barriers between me and the altar, the no barriers, whatever that thing is that happened to me as I was kneeling there and the rail disappeared. That's kind of been my image that sustains me. That yes, I am meant to go up there and just be open. I need to be open to whatever this stuff is. So we both went to seminary at this point, and we both have different churches. They're 75 miles apart from one another. So we live in between, which means I don't get to live in the community where I work, and I don't like that very well, but it's what we do.
You get to be here for the kids on Wednesday nights.
Yeah, and for the whole parish the rest of the time, and serving people at the cafe on Wednesdays, and taking advantage of Iowa City and its crazy life. It's a noisy, crazy life.
I have to ask. Is there any event that stands out to you as that you've kind of tied to the church, or you've done something within Iowa City? Maybe it's the cafe, but I mean, is there an event that really stands out to you as something that you will definitely take away from your experience in Iowa City?
Yes, I would say the very first time I baptized a baby. I'm thinking that was 2008. And I held the baby in my arms. And, everyone thinks it's cool to do weddings, it's cool to do, well, they're okay, but there's nothing like doing a baptism. And blessing that water and putting your hand in the water and then making the sign of the cross on someone's forehead. But the best part of all is my very favorite line in the whole prayer book that says, within the baptismal service, you are sealed by the Holy Spirit in baptism, marked as Christ's own forever. When you think of marked as Christ's own forever, that's very powerful. There's nothing that can wash that off. Belonging to Christ then is that child or that adult, whoever has been baptized, is that person's mark of belonging to Christ. And no matter how rough and difficult their lives may be, and we all are going to have tough times, whether or not they know it, God is at their side. Probably a lot of people that are just really not into religion at all, there's still a part of you, no matter how disconnected you feel you are from religion, there's a part of you that is a spiritual being.